Okay, it looks like you guys can see me. And so now I'm going to do, wait, let me get to the right tab. I'm going to narrate. For this, I'm going to do Mr. Jones. I do have to at some point do Pomegranate Seed. And I want to do A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. I looked up what its story's about. It sounds fascinating. It's a little bit Southern Gothic in the United States. So I know I said I wouldn't do American. I'll make an exception for him. William Faulkner, come on. So anyways, and then I want to do Mr. Jones right now though, and then I want to do Saki. I probably will just narrate my Saki anthology. Like I might take a quick break in between this and doing Saki, but then I'll just do each story back to back because there's I think there's 6 of them here. And then I have to redo The Judge's House, and I want to do Sleepy Hollow too. I'm probably not going to get to all that today, but I definitely want to do Mr. Jones by Edith Wharton right now, and then Saki. I just love Saki. I feel like the author is literally whenever I narrate him, Saki especially. I mean, I feel like he's here dancing. He just seems like such a fun, playful energy. Okay, this is Mr. Jones by Edith Wharton, and then if I get to it tonight, I will do Sleepy Hollow. I probably will. It's not unusual for me to narrate for 8 to 12 hours because usually on Saturdays, Fridays, Saturdays, I narrate for sometimes 8 to 12 hours. And I did used to record audiobooks back in the autumn. And so I've been doing this for a while. My voice is trained, but if it gets me too much, I'll stop obviously. But especially once I get started, I just love it. I could just do this for hours. I really could. I would love to be able to do live storytelling someday. That'd be fun to do maybe. And ghost hunting. I want to go to Carrow Castle in Wales. They have that. It's Carrow Castle, and then there's a bunch of them. St. Donuts. Am I saying it right? But anyways, I want to go ghost hunting in Wales. That would be fun. Okay, Mr. Jones by Edith Wharton. Lady Jane Linky was unlike other people when she heard that she had inherited Bells, the beautiful old place which had belonged to the links of Thudney for something like 600 years. The fancy took her to go and see it unannounced. She was staying at a friend's nearby in Kent, and the next morning she borrowed a motor and slipped away alone to Thudney Blazes, the adjacent village. It was a lustrous, motionless day. Autumn bloom lay on the Sussex downs, on the heavy trees of the weald, on streams moving indolently far off across the marshes. Farther still, Dungeness, a fitful streak, floated on an immaterial sky, which was perhaps, after all, only sky. In the softness, Thudney Blazes slept. A few aged houses bowed about a ducked pond, a silvery spire, orchards thick with dew. Did Thudney Blazes ever wake? Lady Jane left the motor to the care of the geese on a miniature common, pushed open a white gate into a field, the griffon portals being padlocked, and struck across the park toward a group of carved chimney stacks. No one seemed aware of her. In a dip of the land, the long low house, its ripe bricks, masonry overhanging, a moat deeply sunk about its roots, resembled an aged cedar spreading immemorial red branches. Lady Jane held her breath and gazed. A silence distilled from years of solitude lay on lawns and gardens. No one had lived at Bell since the last Lord Thudney, then a penniless younger son, had forsaken it 6 years before to seek his fortune in Canada. And before that, he and his widowed mother, distant poor relations, were housed in one of the lodges, and the great place, even in their day, had been as mute and solitary as the family vault. Lady Jane, daughter of another branch, to which an earldom and considerable possessions had accrued, had never seen Bells, hardly heard its name. A succession of deaths and the whim of an old man she had never known, now made her heir to all this beauty. And as she stood and looked, she was glad she had come to it from so far, from impressions so remote and different. It would be dreadful to be used to it, to be thinking already about the state of the roof or the cost of a heating system. Till this, her 35th year, Lady Jane had led an active, independent, and decided life. One of several daughters, moderately but sufficiently provided for, she had gone early from home, lived in London lodgings, traveled in tropic lands, spent studious summers in Spain and Italy, and written 2 or 3 brisk business-like little books about cities usually dealt with sentimentally. And now, just back from a summer in the south of France, she stood ankle-deep in wet bracken and gazed at Bells lying there under a September sun that looked like moonlight. I shall never leave it, she ejaculated, her heart swelling as if she had taken a vow to a lover. She ran down the last slope of the park and entered the faded formality of gardens, with clipped yews as ornate as architecture, and holly hedges as solid as walls. Joining the house rose a low, deep buttressed chapel. Its door was ajar, and she thought this of good augury. Her forebears were waiting for her. In the porch she remarked fly-blown notices of services, an umbrella stem, a disheveled doormat. No doubt the chapel served as the village church. The thought gave her a sense of warmth and neighborliness. Across the damp flags of the chancel, monuments and brasses showed through a tracery screen. She examined them curiously. Some held her with vocal memories, others whispered out at the remote and the unknown. It was a shame to know so little about her own family. But neither Cross nor Lynx had ever greatly distinguished themselves. They had gathered substance simply by holding on to what they had, and slowly accumulated privileges and acres, mostly by clever marriages, Lady Jane thought with a faint contempt. At that moment her eyes lit on one of the less ornate monuments, a plain sarcophagus of grey marble niched in the wall and surmounted by the bust of a young man with a fine arrogant head, a Byronic throat and tossed back curls. Peregrine Vincent Theobald Link, Baron Clouds, 15th Viscount Thudney of Bells, Lord of the Manors of Thudney, Thudney Blazes, Upper Link, Link Lynette, so it ran, with the usual tedious enumeration of honours, titles, court and county offices, ending with born on May 1st, 1790, perished of the plague at Aleppo in 1828, and underneath in small cramped characters, as if crowded as an afterthought into an insufficient space, also his wife. That was all. No name, dates, honours, epitaphs for the Viscountess Thudney. Did she too die of a plague at Aleppo, or did they also imply her actual presence in the sarcophagus which her husband's pride had no doubt prepared for his own last sleep, little guessing that some Syrian drain was to receive him? Lady Jane racked her memory in vain. All that she knew was the death without issue of this Lord Thudney had caused the property to revert to the Croft Linkes, and so in the end brought her to the chancel step where, shyly, she knelt a moment, vowing to the dead to carry on their trust. She passed on to the entrance court and stood at last at the door of her new home, a blunt tweed figure in heavy mud-stained shoes. She felt as intrusive as a tripper, and her hand hesitated on the doorbell. I ought to have brought someone with me, she thought, an odd admission on the part of a young woman who, when she was doing her books of travel, had prided herself on forcing single-handedly the most closely guarded doors, but those other places, as she looked back, seemed easy and accessible compared to bells. She rang, and a tinkle answered, carried on by a flurried echo which seemed to ask what in the world was happening. Lady Jane, through the nearest window, caught the spectral vista of a long room, with shrouded furniture. She could not see its farther end, but she had the feeling that someone stationed there might very well be seeing her. Just at first, she thought, I shall have to invite people here to take the chill off. She rang again, and the tinkle again proved itself, but no one came. At last she reflected that the caretakers probably lived at the back of the house, and pushing open a door in the courtyard wall, she worked her way around to what seemed a stableyard. Against the purple brick sprawled the neglected magnolia, bearing one late flower as big as a planet. Lady Janet rang at a door marked service. This bell, though also languid, had a wakefuller sound, as if it were more used to being wrong, and still knew what was likely to follow. And after a delay, during which Lady Jane again had the sense of being peered at from above, through a lowered blind, a bolt shot, and a woman looked out. She was youngish, unhealthy, respectable, and frightened, and she blinked at Lady Jane like someone waking out of sleep. Oh, said Lady Jane, do you think I might visit the house? The house? I'm staying near here. I'm interested in old houses. Might I take a look? The young woman drew back. The house isn't shown. Oh, but not to, Jane made the case. You see, she explained, I know some of the family, the Northumberland branch. You're related, madam? Well, distantly, yes. It was exactly what she had not meant to say, but there seemed no other way. The woman twisted her apron strings in perplexity. Come, you know, Lady Jane urged, producing half a crown. The woman turned pale. I couldn't, madam. Not without asking. It was clear that she was sorely tempted. "We'll ask, won't you?" Lady Jane pressed a tip into the hesitating hand. The young woman shut the door and vanished. She was away so long that the visitor concluded her half-crown had been pocketed and there was an end, and she began to be angry with herself, which was more often her habit than to be so with others. "Well, for a fool, Jane, you're a complete one," she grumbled. A returning footstep, listless, reluctant, the tread of one who was not going to let her in. It began to be rather comic. The door opened, and the young woman said in her dull sing-song, "Mr. Jones says no one is allowed to visit the house." She and Lady Jane looked at each other for a moment, and Lady Jane read the apprehension in the other's eyes. "Mr. Jones? Oh, yes, of course, keep it." She waved away the woman's hand. "Thank you, madam." The door closed again, and Lady Jane stood and gazed up at the inexorable face of her old home. Chapter 2. "But you didn't get in? You actually came back without so much as a peep?" Her story was received that evening at dinner with mingled mirth and incredulity. "But, my dear, you mean to say you asked to see the house and they wouldn't let you?" "Who wouldn't?" Lady Jane's hostess insisted. "Mr. Jones." "Mr. Jones?" "He said no one was allowed to see it." "Well, who on earth is Mr. Jones?" "The caretaker, I suppose. I didn't see him." "Didn't see him either, but I never heard such nonsense. Why in the world didn't you insist?" "Yes, why didn't you?" they all chorused. And she could only answer a little lamely, I think I was afraid." "Afraid? You, darling?" There was fresh hilarity of Mr. Jones. "I suppose so." She joined in the laugh, yet she knew it was true. She had been afraid. Edward Strammer, the novelist, an old friend of her family, had been listening with an air of abstraction, his eyes on his empty coffee cup. Suddenly, as the mistress of the house pushed back her chair, he looked across the table at Lady Jean. "It's odd. I've just remembered something. Once when I was a youngster, I tried to see bells over 30 years ago, it must have been." He glanced at his host. "Your mother drove me over, and we were not let in." There was a certain flatness in his conclusion, and someone remarked that bells had always been known as harder to get into than any house thereabouts. "Yes," said Strammer, "but the point is that we were refusing exactly the same words. Mr. Jones said no one was allowed to visit the house." "Ah, he was in possession already, 30 years ago? Unsociable fellow, Jones. Well, Jane, you've got a good watchdog." They moved into the drawing room, and the talk drifted to other topics. But Strammer came and sat down beside Lady Jane. "It is queer, though, that at such a distance of time we should have been given exactly the same answer." She glanced up at him curiously. "Yes. And you didn't try to force your way in either?" "Oh, no, it was not possible." "So I felt," she agreed. "Well, next week, my dear. I hope we shall see it all." In spite of Mr. Jones, their hostess intervened, catching their last words as she moved toward the piano. "I wonder if we shall see Mr. Jones," said Strammer. Chapter 3. Bell's was not nearly as large as it looked. Like many old houses, it was very narrow, and but one story high, with servants' rooms in the low attics, and much space wasted in crooked passages and superfluous stairs. If she closed the great saloon, Jane thought, she might live there comfortably with a small staff, which was the most she could afford. It was a relief to find the place less important than she had feared. For already in that first hour of arrival, she had decided to give everything else for Bell's. Her previous plans and ambitions, except such as might fit in with living there, had fallen from her like a discarded garment, and things she had hardly thought about or had shrugged away with the hasty sub, subserviousness of youth were already laying quiet hands on her. All the lives from which her life had issued, from what they bore of example or admonishment. The very shabbiness of the house moved her more than splendors, made it after its long abandonment seem full of the careless daily coming and going of people long dead. People to whom it had not been a museum or a page of history, but cradle, nursery, home, sometimes no doubt a prison, if those marble lips in the chapel could speak. She could hear some of their comments on the old house which had spread its silent shelter over their sins and sorrows, their follies and submissions. A long tale to which she was about to add another chapter, subdued and humdrum beside some of those earlier annals, yet probably freer and more varied than the unchronicled lives of the great aunts and the great grandmothers buried there so completely that they must hardly have known when they passed from their beds to their graves. Piled up like dead leaves, Jane thought, layers and layers of them, to preserve something forever budding underneath. Well, All these piled up lives had at last preserved the old house in its integrity. That was worthwhile. She was satisfied to carry on such a trust. She sat in the garden looking up at those rosy walls, iridescent with damp and age. She decided which windows should be hers, which rooms given to the friends from Kent who were motoring over. Strammer among them for a modest housewarming, then she got up and went in. The hour had come for domestic questions, for she had arrived alone, unsupported even by the old family housemaid her mother had offered her. She preferred to start afresh, convinced that her small household could be staffed from the neighborhood. Mrs. Clem, the rosy-cheeked old person who had curtsied her across the threshold, would doubtless know. Mrs. Clem, summoned to the library, curtsied again. She wore black silk, gathered and spreading as the skirt flattened perpendicular as the bodice. On her glossy false front was a black lace cap with ribbons, which had faded from violet to ash color, and a heavy watch chain descended from the lava brooch under her crochet collar. Her small round face rested on the collar like a red apple on a white plate, neat, smooth, circular, with a pursed-up mouth, eyes like black seeds, and round, ruddy cheeks with the skin so taut that one had to look close to see that it was as wrinkled as a piece of old crackly. Mrs. Clem was sure there would be no trouble about servants. She herself could do a little cooking, though her hand might be a bit out. But there was her niece to help, and she was quite of her ladyship's opinion that there was no need to get in strangers. They were mostly a poor lot, and besides, they might not take to bells. There were persons who didn't. Mrs. Clem smiled a sharp little smile, like the scratch of a pin, as she added that she hoped her ladyship wouldn't be one of them. As for under-servants, well, a boy perhaps, she had a great nephew who she might send for. But about women, under housemaids of her ladyship thought they couldn't manage as they were, well, she really didn't know. Thudney Blazes, oh, she didn't think so. There was more dead than living at Thudney Blazes. Everyone was leaving there or in the churchyard, one house after another being shut. Death was everywhere, wasn't it, my lady? Mrs. Clem said it with another of her short, sharp smiles, which provoked the appearance of a frosty dimple. She sounds hard. But my niece Georgiana is a hard worker, my lady. Her that let you in the other day. That didn't, Lady Jane corrected. Oh, my lady, it was too unfortunate. If only your ladyship had have said, poor Georgiana ought to have seen, but she never did. She have her wits about her, not for answering the door. But she was only obeying orders. She went to ask Mr. Jones. Mrs. Clem was silent. Her small hands, wrinkled and resolute, fumbled with the folds of her apron, and her quick eyes made the circuit of the room and then came back to Lady Jane's. Just so, my lady, but as I told her, she ought to have known. And who is Mr. Jones? Mrs. Clem's smile snapped out again, deprecating, respectful. Well, my lady, he's more dead than living, too, if I may say so, was her surprising answer. Is he? I'm sorry to hear that, but who is he? Well, my lady, he's my great-uncle, as it were, my grandmother's own brother, as you might say. Ah, I see. Lady Jane considered her with growing curiosity. He must have reached a great age, then. Yes, my lady, he has that. Though I'm not, Mrs. Clem agreed, the dimple showing. As old myself as your ladyship might suppose. Living at Bell's all these years has been aging to me. It would beat anybody. I suppose so, and yet, Lady Jane continued, Mr. Jones has survived. Has stood it well as you certainly have. Oh, no, not as well as I have. Mrs. Clem interjected as if resentful of the comparison. At any rate, he still mounts guard, mounts it as well as he did 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Mrs. Clem echoed, her hands dropping from her apron to her sides. Wasn't he here 30 years ago? Oh, yes, my lady, certainly. He's never once been away that I know of. What a wonderful record, and what exactly are his duties? Mrs. Clem paused again, her hands still motionless in the fold of her skirt. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Lady Jane noticed that the fingers were tightly clenched, as if to check an involuntary gesture. He began as pantry boy, then footman, then butler, my lady. But it's hard to say, isn't it, what an old servant's duties are? When he stayed on in the same house so many years. Yes, and that house always empty. Just so, my lady. Everything came to depend on him, one thing after another. His late lordship thought the world of him. His late lordship? But he was never here. He's been all his life in Canada. Mrs. Clem seemed slightly disconcerted. "Well, certainly, my lady." Her voice said, "Who are you to set me right as to the chronicles of bells?" "But by letter, my lady. I can show you the letters. And there was his lordship before. The 16th Viscount. He did come here once." "Ah, did he?" Lady Jane was embarrassed to find how little she knew of all of them. She rose from her seat. They were lucky, all these absentees, to have someone to watch over their interests so faithfully. "I shall like to see Mr. Jones, to thank him. Will you take me to him now?" Now Mrs. Clem moved back a step or two. Lady Jean fancied her cheeks paled a little under their ruddy varnish. "Oh, not today, my lady." "Why, isn't he well enough?" "Not nearly. He's between life and death, as it were," Mrs. Clem repeated, as if the phrase were the nearest approach she could find to a definition of Mr. Jones's state. "He wouldn't even know who I was." Mrs. Clem considered a moment. "I don't say that, my lady." Her tone implied that to do so might appear disrespectful. "He'd know you, my lady, but you wouldn't know him." She broke off and added hastily, "I mean for what he is. He's in no state for you to see him." "He's so very ill, poor man, and is everything possible being done?" "Oh, everything and more too, my lady, but perhaps," Mrs. Clem suggested with the clink of keys, "this would be a good time for your ladyship to take a look about the house, if your ladyship has no objection. I should like to begin with the linen." Chapter 4. "And Mr. Jones?" Strammer queried a few days later, as they sat, Lady Jane and the party from Kent, about an improvised tea table in the recess of one of the great holly hedges. The day was as hushed and warm as that on which she had first come to Bells, and Lady Jane looked up with a smile of ownership at the old walls, which seemed to smile back, the windows which now looked at her with friendly eyes. "Mr. Jones." "Who's Mr. Jones?" the others asked. Only Stammer recalled their former talk. Lady Jane hesitated. "Mr. Jones is my invisible guardian, or rather the guardian of Bells." They remembered that. "Invisible? You don't mean to say you haven't seen him yet?" "Not yet, perhaps I never shall. He's very old and very ill, I'm afraid." "And he still rules here?" "Oh, absolutely. The fact is," Lady Jane added, "I believe he's the only person left who really knows all about Bells. Knows all at Bells. No, knows all about Bells." "Jane, my dear, that big shrub over there against the wall, I verily believe it's Temple Tonia retusa. It is. Did anyone ever hear of it standing in English winter?" Gardeners all day dashed towards the shrub in its sheltered angle. "I shall certainly try it on the south wall at Dipway," cried the hostess from Kent. Tea over, they moved on to inspect the house. The short autumn day was drawing to a close, but the party had been able to come only for an afternoon instead of staying over the weekend, and having lingered so long in the gardens, they had only time indoors to puzzle out what they could through the shadows. Perhaps Lady Jane thought it was the best hour to see the house like Bells, so long abandoned and not yet warmed into new life. The fire she had lit in the saloon sent its radiance to meet them, giving the great room an air of expectancy and welcome. The portraits, the Italian cabinets, the shabby armchairs and rugs, all looked as if life had lately left them. Lady Jane said to herself, "Perhaps Mrs. Clem is right in advising me to live here and close the blue parlor. My dear, what a fine room! Pity it faces north. Of course, I'll have to shut it in winter. It would cost a fortune to heat." Lady Jane hesitated. "I don't know. I had meant to, but there seems to be no other." "No other in all this house?" They laughed, and one of the visitors, going ahead and crossed the paneled anteroom, cried out, "But here a delicious room, windows south, yes, and west. The warmest of the house. This is perfect." They followed, and the blue room echoed with exclamations. "Those charming curtains with the parrots! And the blue of the petite pont fire is green. But, Jean, of course you must live here. Look at the citron wood desk." Lady Jane stood at the threshold. "It seems that the chimney smokes hopelessly." "Hopelessly nonsense. As if you consulted anybody. I said you're a wonderful man. Besides, if you put in one of those one-pipe heaters at Dipway." Stammer was looking over Lady Jane's shoulder. "What does Mr. Jones say about it?" "He says no one has ever been able to use his room, not for ages. It was a housekeeper who told me. She is his Grace niece, and seems simply to transmit his oracles." Stammer shrugged. "Well, he's lived at Bells longer than you have. Perhaps he's right." "How absurd!" one of the ladies cried. "The housekeeper and Mr. Jones probably spend their evenings here and don't want to be disturbed. Look, ashes on the hearth. What did I tell you?" Lady Jane echoed the laugh, and they turned away. They had still to see the library, damp and dilapidated, the paneled dining room, the breakfast parlor, and such bedrooms as had any old furniture left. Not many, for the late lords of Bells at one time or another had evidently sold most of its removable treasures. When the visitors came down, their motors were waiting. A lamp had been placed in the hall, but the rooms beyond were lit only by the broad, clear band of western sky, showing through uncurtained casements. On the doorstep, one of the ladies exclaimed that she had lost her handbag. No, she remembered. She had laid it on the desk in the blue room. Which way was the blue room? I'll get it, Jean said, turning back. She heard Strammer following. He asked if he should bring the lamp. Oh, no, I can see. She crossed the threshold of the blue room, guided by the light from its western window. Then she stopped. Someone was in the room already. She felt rather than saw another presence. Strammer behind her paused also. He did not speak or move. What she saw or thought she saw was simply an old man with bent shoulders turning away from the citron wood desk. Almost before she had received the impression, there was no one there. Only the slightest stir of the needlework curtain over the farther door. She heard no step or other sound. There's the back, she said, as if the act of speaking and saying something obvious were relief. In the hall, her glance crossed Strammer's, but failed to find there the reflection of what her own had registered. He shook hands, smiling. Well, goodbye. I commit you to Mr. Jones' care, only don't let him say that you're not shown to visitors. She smiled. Come back and try, and then shivered a little as the lights of the last motor vanished beyond the great black hedges. Chapter 5. Lady Jane had exulted in her resolve to keep Bells to herself, till she and the old house should have had time to make friends. But after a few days she recalled the uneasy feeling which had come over her as she stood on the threshold after her first tentative ring. Yes, she had been right in thinking she would have to have people about her to take the chill off. The house was too old, too mysterious, too much withdrawn into its own secret past for her own little present to fit into it without uneasiness. But it was not a time of year when among Lady Jane's friends it was easy to find people free. Her own family were all in the north and impossible to dislodge. One of her sisters, when invited, simply sent her back a list of shooting dates, and her mother wrote, Why not come to us? What can you have to do all alone in that empty house at this time of year? Next summer we'll all come. Oh my God, that sounds nice, being in the north in the fall. Having tried one or two friends with the same result, Lady Jane bethought her of Strammer. He was finishing a novel, she knew, and at such times he liked to settle down somewhere in the country where he could be sure of not being disturbed. Bells was a perfect asylum, and thought it was probable that some other friend had anticipated her and provided the requisite seclusion. Lady Jane decided to invite him. Do bring your work and stay till it's finished, and don't be in a hurry to finish. I promise that no one shall bother you. And she added half nervously, not even Mr. Jones. As she wrote, she felt an absurd impulse to blot the words out. He might not like it, she thought, and the he did not refer to Strammer. Was it solitude already making her superstitious? She thrust the letter into an envelope and carried it herself to the post office at Thilney Blazes. 2 days later, a wire from Strammer announced his arrival. He came on a cold, stormy afternoon, just before dinner. As they went up to dress, Lady Jane called after him, We shall sit in the blue parlor this evening. The housemaid Georgiana was crossing the passage with hot water for the visitor. She stopped and cast a vacant glance at Lady Jane. The latter met it and said carelessly, You hear, Georgiana, the fire in the blue parlor? While Lady Jane was dressing, she heard a knock and saw Miss Clem's round face just inside the door, like a red apple on a garden wall. Is there anything wrong about the saloon, my lady? Georgiana understood. That I want the fire in the blue parlor, yes. What's wrong with the saloon is that one freezes there. But the chimney smokes in the blue parlor. Well, we'll give it a trial, and if it does, I'll send for someone to arrange it. Nothing can be done, my lady. Everything has been tried, and Lady Jane swung about suddenly. She had heard Strammer singing a cheerful, haunting song in a cracked voice in his dressing room at the other end of the corridor. That will do, Mrs. Clem. I want the fire in the blue parlor. Yes, my lady. The door closed on the housekeeper. So you decided on the saloon after all, Strammer said as Lady Jane led the way thereafter their brief repast. Yes, I hope you won't be frozen. Mr. Jones swears that the chimney in the blue fire isn't safe, so till I can fetch the mason over from Strawbridge. Oh, I see. Strammer drew up to the blaze in the great fireplace. We're very well off here, though heating this room is going to be ruinous. Meanwhile, I note that Mr. Jones still rules. Lady Jane gave a slight laugh. Tell me, Strammer continued as she bent over the mixing of the Turkish coffee. What is there about him? I'm getting curious. Lady Jane laughed again and heard the embarrassment in her laugh. So am I. Why, you don't mean to say you haven't seen him yet? No, he's still too ill. What's the matter with him? What does the doctor say? You won't see the doctor? But look here, if things take a worse turn, I don't know. But mightn't you be held to have been negligent? What can I do? Mrs. Clem says he is a doctor who treats him by correspondence. I don't see that I can interfere. Isn't there someone besides Mrs. Clem whom you can consult? She considered certainly as yet she had not made much effort to get into relation with the neighbours. I expected the vicar to call, but I've inquired there's no vicar any longer at Thunny Blazes. A curate comes from Strawbridge every other Sunday. The one who comes now is new. Nobody about the place seems to know. But I thought the chapel here was in use. It looked so when you showed it to us the other day. I thought so too. It used to be the parish church of Link Lynette and Lower Link, but it seems that was years ago. The parishioners objected to coming so far, and there weren't enough of them. Mrs. Clem says that nearly everybody has died off or left. It's the same at Thunny Blazes. Strammer glanced about the great room with its circled warmth and light by the fire, by the hearth, and the sullen shadows huddled at its farther end, as if hungrily listening. With this emptiness at the centre, life was bound to cease gradually on the outskirts. Lady Jean followed his glance. Yes, it's all wrong. I must try to wake the place up. Why not open it to the public, have a visitor's day? She thought a moment. In itself, the suggestion was distasteful. She could imagine few things that would bore her more. Yet to do so might be a duty, a first step toward re-establishing relations between the lifeless house and its neighborhood. Secretly, she felt that even the coming and going of indifferent unknown person would help to take the chill from these rooms, to brush from their walls the dust of too heavy memories. Who's that? Asked Tremor. Lady Jane started in spite of herself and glanced over her shoulder, but he was only looking past her at a portrait, which a dart of flame from the hearth had momentarily called from its obscurity. That's a Lady Thudney. She got up and went toward the picture with a lamp. Might be an Opie, don't you think? It's a strange face under the smirk of that period. Strummer took the lamp and held it up. The portrait was that of a young woman in a short-waisted muslin gown, caught beneath the breast by a cameo. Between clusters of beribboned curls, a long, fair oval looked out dumbly, inexpressibly in a stare of frozen beauty. As if the house had been too empty even then, Lady Jean murmured. I wonder which she was, so I know it must be also his wife. Strammer stared. It's the only name on her monument. The wife of Peregrine Vincent Theobald, who perished of the plague in Aleppo in 1828. Perhaps she was very fond of him, and this was painted when she was an inconsolable widow. They didn't dress like that as late as 1828, Strammer, holding the lamp closer, deciphered the inscription on the border of the Lady India scarf. Juliana Viscountess Thudney, 1818. She must have been inconsolable before his death, then. Lady Jane smiled. Let's hope she grew less so after it. Strammer passed the lamp across the canvas. Do you see where she was painted? In the blue parlor. Look, the old paneling. And she's leaning on the citron wood desk. They evidently used the room in winter then. The lamp paused on the background of the picture, a window framing snow-laden paths and hedges in icy perspective. Curious, Strammer said, and rather melancholy to be painted against that wintry desolation. I wish you could find out more about her. Have you dipped into your archives? No, Mr. Jones. He won't allow that either. Yes, but he's lost the key of the monument room. Mrs. Clem has been trying to get a locksmith. Surely the neighborhood can still produce one. There was one at Thunny Blazes, but he died the week before I came. Of course. Well, in Mrs. Clem's hands, keys get lost, chimney smoke, locksmiths die. Strammer stood light in hand, looking down the shadowy length of the saloon. I say, let's go and see what's happening now in the blue parlor. Lady Jane laughed. A laugh seemed easy with another voice nearby to echo it. Let's. She followed him out of the saloon, across the hall, in which a single candle burned on a far-off table, and past the stairway, yawning like a black funnel above them. In the doorway of the blue parlor, Strammer paused. Now then, Mr. Jones. It was stupid, but Lady Jane's heart gave a jerk. She hoped the challenge would not evoke the shadowy figure she had half seen that other day. Lord, it's cold. Strammer stood looking about him. Those ashes are still on the hearth. Well, it's all very queer. He crossed over the citronwood desk. There's where she sat for a picture in this very armchair. Look. Oh, don't, Lady Jane exclaimed. The word slipped out unawares. Don't what? Try those drawers, she wanted to reply, for his hand was stretched toward the desk. I'm frozen. I think I'm starting to cold. Do come away, she grumbled, backing toward the door. Strammer lighted her out without comment. As the lamplight slid along the walls, Lady Jane fancied that the needlework curtain over the further door stirred as it had the other day. But it may have been the wind rising outside. The saloon seemed like home when they got back to it. "There is no Mr. Jones," Strammer proclaimed it triumphantly when they met the next morning. Lady Jane had motored off early to Strawbridge in quest of a mason and a locksmith. The quest had taken longer than she expected, for everybody in Strawbridge was busy on jobs nearby and unaccustomed to the idea of going to bells, with which the town seemed to have had no communication within living memory. The younger workmen did not even know where the place was, and the best Lady Jane could do was coax a locksmith's apprentice to come with her, on the understanding that he would be driven back to the nearest station as soon as his job was over. As for the mason, he had merely taken note of her request and promised half-heartedly to send somebody when he could. Rather off our beat, though. She returned discouraged and somewhat weary as Strummer was coming downstairs after his morning's work. "No, Mr. Jones," she echoed. "Not a trace. I've been trying the old Glamis experiment, situating his room by its window. Luckily, the house is smaller." Lady Jane smiled. "Is that what you call locking yourself up with your work?" "I can't work, that's the trouble. Not till this is settled. Bell's is a fidgety place." "Yes," she agreed. "Well, I wasn't going to be beaten, so I went to try to find the head gardener, but there isn't. No, Mrs. Clem told me the head gardener died last year. That woman positively glows with life whenever she announces a death. Have you noticed?" Yes, Lady Jane had. "Well, I said to myself that if there wasn't a head gardener, there must be an underling, at least one. I seen somebody in that distance raking leaves, and I ran him down. Of course, he's never seen Mr. Jones." "You mean that poor old half-blind Jacob? He couldn't see anybody." "Perhaps not. At any rate, he told me that Mr. Jones wouldn't let the leaves be buried for leaf mold. I forget why. Mr. Jones's authority extends even to the gardens." "Yet you say he doesn't exist." "Wait, Jacob is half-blind, but he's been here for years and knows more about the place than you'd think. I got him talking about the house, and I pointed to one window after another, and he told me each time whose room was or had been, but he couldn't situate Mr. Jones." "I beg your ladyship's pardon." Mrs. Clem was on the threshold, cheeks shining, skirt rustling, her eyes like drills. "The locksmith your ladyship brought back, I understand it was for the lock of the muniment room. Well, he's lost one of his tools and can't do anything without it, so he's gone. The butcher's boy gave him a lift back." Lady Jane caught Strummer's faint chuckle. She stood and stared at Mrs. Clem, and Mrs. Clem stared back, deferential but unflinching. "Gone, very well. I'll moor after him." "Oh, my lady, it's too late. The butcher's boy had his motorcycle. Besides, what could he do?" "Break the lock?" exclaimed Lady Jane, exasperated. "Oh, my lady!" Mrs. Clem's intonation marked the most respectful incredulity. She waited another moment and then withdrew, while Lady Jane and Strammer considered each other. "But this is absurd," Lady Jane declared when they had lunched, waited on as usual by the flustered Georgiana. "I'll break in that door myself if I have to. Be careful, please, Georgiana," she added. I was speaking of doors, not dishes, for Georgiana had let fall with a crash the dish she was removing from the table. She gathered up the pieces in her tremulous fingers and vanished. Jane and Strammer returned to the saloon. "Queer," the novelist commented. "Yes," Lady Jane, facing the door, started slightly. Mrs. Clem was there again, but this time subdued, unwrestling, bathed in that odd pallor which enclosed but seemed unable to penetrate the soft crimson of her cheeks. "I beg pardon, my lady. The key is found." Her hand, as she stretched it out, trembled like Georgiana's. Chapter 7. "It's not here," Strammer announced a couple of hours later. "What isn't?" Lady Jane queried, looking up from a heap of disordered papers. Her eyes blinked at him through the fog of yellow dust raised by her manipulations. "The clue. I've got all the 1800 to 1840 papers here, and there's a gap." She moved over the table, he was bending. A gap? A big one. Nothing between 1815 and 1835. No mention of Peregrine or Juliana. They looked at each other across the tossed papers, and suddenly Strammer exclaimed, "Someone has been here before us just lately." Lady Jane stared incredulous, and then followed the direction of his downward pointed hand. "Do you wear flat, heelless shoes?" he questioned. "I know that size. Even my feet are too small to fit into those footprints. Luckily, there wasn't time to sweep the floor." Light another one. Luckily, there wasn't time to sweep the floor. Lady Jane felt a sudden chill. A chill of a different, more inward quality than the shock of stuffy coldness, which had met them as they entered the unaired attic space set apart for the storing of the Thudney archives. But how absurd! Of course, when Mrs. Clem found we were coming up, she Gamer, she sent someone to open the shutters. That's not Mrs. Clem's foot or any other woman's. She must have sent the man, an old man with a shaky, uncertain step. Look how it wanders. Mr. Jones, then, said Lady Jane, half impatient. Mr. Jones, and he got what he wanted and put it where? Ah, that. I'm freezing you now. Let's give this up for the present, she rose, and Strummer followed her without protest. The monument room was really untenable. I must catalog all the stuff someday, I suppose. Lady Jane continued as they went down the stairs. But, meanwhile, what do you say to a good tramp to get the dust out of our lungs? He agreed and went and turned back to his room to get some letters he wanted to post at Thorny Blazes. Lady Jane went down alone. It was a fine afternoon, and the sun, which had made the dust clouds of the monument room so dazzling, sent a long shaft through the west window of the blue parlor and across the floor of the hall. Certainly Georgiana kept the oak floors remarkably well, considering how much else she had to do. It was Lady Jane stopped, as if an unseen hand had jerked her violently back. On the smooth parquet floor before her, she had caught the trace of dusty footprints, the prints of broad-soled, heelless shoes, making for the blue parlor and crossing its threshold. She stood still with the same inward shiver that she had felt upstairs, then, avoiding the footprints, she too stole very softly toward the blue parlor, pushed the door wider, and saw that long dazzle of autumn light, as if translucid, edged with the glitter. An old man at the desk. Mr. Jones. A step came up behind her. Mrs. Clem with the post bag. You called, my lady? Yes. When she turned back to the desk, there was no one there. She faced about on the housekeeper. Who was that? Where, my lady? Lady Jane, without answering, moved toward the needlework curtain, in which she detected the same pink trimmers for. Where does that door go to behind the curtain? Nowhere, my lady. I mean, there is no door. Mrs. Clem had followed. Her step sounded quick and assured. She lifted up the curtain with a firm hand. Behind it was a rectangle of roughly plastered wall where an opening had visibly been bricked up. When was that done? The wall built up? I couldn't say. I've never known it otherwise. The two women stood for an instant, measuring each other with level eyes. Then the housekeepers were slowly lowered, and she let the curtain fall from her hand. There are a great many things in old houses that nobody knows about, she said. There shall be as few as possible in mine, said Lady Jane. My lady. The housekeeper started quickly in front of her. My lady. What are you doing? Lady Jane had turned back to the desk, at which she had just seen or fancied she had seen the bending figure of Mr. Jones. I'm going to open these drawers, she said. The housekeeper still stood in pale immobility between her and the desk. No, my lady, no. You won't do that. Because? Mrs. Clem crumpled up her black silk apron with a despairing gesture. Because, if you will have it, that's where Mr. Jones keeps his private papers. I know he ought to. Ah, then it was Mr. Jones I saw here. The housekeeper's arm sank to her sides and saw her mouth hung open to an unspoken word. You saw him? The question came out in a confused whisper, and before Lady Jane could answer, Mrs. Clem's arms rose again, stretched before her face, as if to fend off a blaze of intolerable light, or some forbidden sight she had long since disciplined herself not to see. Thus, screen in her eyes, she hurried across the hall to the door of the servants' wing. Lady Jane stood for a moment looking after her. Then, with a slightly shaking hand, she opened the desk and hurriedly took out from it all the papers, a small bundle that it contained. With them, she passed back into the saloon. As she entered it, her eye was caught by the portrait of the melancholy lady in the short waisted gown, whom she and Strammer had christened also his wife. The lady's eyes, usually so empty of all awareness, save of her own frozen beauty, seemed suddenly waking to an anguished participation in the scene. Fudge, muttered Lady Jane, shaking off the spectral suggestion as she turned to meet Strammer on the threshold. Chapter 8. The missing papers were all there. Strammer, and she spread them out hurriedly on a table and at once proceeded to gloat over their find. Not a particularly important one indeed in the long history of the links and cross. It took up hardly more space than a little handful of documents did. In actual bulk among the stacks of the muniment room. But the fact that these papers filled the gap in the chronicles of the story. In the chronicles of the house, and situated the sad-faced beauty as veritably the wife of Peregrine Vincent Theobald Link, who had perished of the plague at Aleppo in 1828, there was a discovery sufficiently exciting to whet amateur appetites and to put out of Lady Jane's mind the strange incident which had attended the opening of the cabinet. For a while, she and Stammer sat silently and methodically going through their respective piles of correspondence, but presently Lady Jane, after glancing over one of the yellowing pages, uttered a startled exclamation. How strange, Mr. Jones again. Always Mr. Jones. Strammer looked up from the papers he was sorting. You too. I've got a good lot of letters here addressed to a Mr. Jones by Peregrine Vincent, who seems to have always deported himself abroad and chronically want of money, gambling debts apparently, on woman and dirty record altogether. Yes, my letter is not written to a Mr. Jones, but it's about one. Listen. Lady Jane began to read. Bells, February 20th, 1826. It's from poor Ursula's wife to her husband. My dear Lord, acknowledging as I ever do the burden of the sad impediment, which denies me the happiness of being more frequently in your company, I yet fail to conceive how anything in my state obliges that close seclusion in which Mr. Jones persists, and by your express orders, so he declares, in confining me. Surely, my lord, had you found it impossible to stay more time with me since the day of our marriage, you would yourself have seen it to be unnecessary to put this restraint upon me. It is true, alas, that my unhappy infirmity denies me the happiness to speak with you, or to hear the accents of the voice I should love above all others, could it but reach me. But, my dear husband, I would have you consider that my mind is in no way affected by this obstacle, but goes out to you as my heart does, in a perpetual eagerness of attention, and that to sit in this great house alone day after day, month after month, deprived of your company, and debarred also from any intercourse but that of the servants you have chosen to put about me, is a fate more cruel than I deserve, more painful than I can bear. I have entreated Mr. Jones, since he seems all powerful with you, to represent this to you and to transmit this my last request. For should I fail, I am resolved to make no other, that you should consent to my making the acquaintance of a few of your friends and neighbors, among whom I cannot but think there must be some kind hearts that would take pity on my unhappy situation and afford me such companionship would give me more courage to bear your continual absence. Lady Jane folded up the letter, deaf and dumb. Ah, poor creature. That explains the look. This explains the marriage, Strammer continued, unfolding a stiff parchment document. Here are the Viscountess Studney's marriage settlements. She appears to have been a Miss Portallo, daughter of Obadiah Portallo, Esquire, Purfleet Castle, Carmarthenshire, and Bombay House, Twickenham, East India merchant, senior member of the banking house of Portallo and Press, and so on, and so on. And the figures run up into hundreds of thousands. It's rather ghastly, putting the two things together. All the millions and imprisonment in the Blue Parlor. I suppose her viscount had to have the money and was ashamed to have it known how he'd got it. Lady Jane shivered. Think of it, day after day, winter after winter, year after year, speechless, soundless, alone, under Mr. Jones's guardianship. Let me see, what year were they married? In 1817? And only a year later that portrait was painted and she had that frozen look already. Strammer mused. Yes, it's grim enough, but the strangest figure in the whole case is still Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, yes, her keeper, Lady Jane mused. I suppose he must have been this one's ancestor. The office seems to have been hereditary, Bells. Well, I don't know. Strammer's voice was so odd. The Lady Jane looked up at him with a stare of surprise. What if it were the same one? Suggested Strammer with a queer smile. The same Lady Jane laughed. You're not good at figures, are you? If poor Lady Thudney's Mr. Jones were alive now, he'd be. I didn't say ours was alive now, said Strammer. Oh, but what? She faltered. But Strammer did not answer. His eyes had been arrested by the precipitate opening of the door behind his hostess and the entry of Georgiana. A livid, disheveled Georgiana, more than usually bereft of her faculties, and gasping out something inarticulate. Oh, my lady, it's my aunt. She won't answer me. Georgiana stammered in a voice of terror. Lady Jane uttered an impatient exclamation. Answer you? What would you want her to answer? Only whether she's alive, my lady, said Georgiana with streaming eyes. Lady Jane continued to look at her severely. Alive? Alive. Why on earth shouldn't she be? She might as well be dead by the way she just lies there. Your aunt dead? I saw her alive enough in the blue parlor half an hour ago, Lady Jane returned. She was growing rather blasé with regard to Georgiana's panics, but suddenly she felt this to be of a different nature from any of the others. Where's your aunt's lying? In her own bedroom on her bed, the other wailed, and won't say why. Jean got to her feet, pushing aside the heaped up papers and hastening to the door, with Strammer in her wake. As they went up the stairs, she realized that she had seen the housekeeper's bedroom only once on the day of her first obligatory round of inspection, when she had taken possession of Belle's. She did not even remember very clearly where it was, but followed Georgiana down the passage, and through a door which communicated rather surprisingly with the narrow walled-in staircase that was unfamiliar to her. At its top, she and Strammer found themselves on a small landing, upon which two doors opened. Through the confusion of her mind, Lady Jane noticed that these rooms, with their special staircase leading down to what had always been called his lordship's suite, must obviously have been occupied by his lordship's confidential servants. In one of them, presumably, had been lodged the original Mr. Jones. The Mr. Jones of the yellow letters, the letters purloined by Lady Jane. As she crossed the threshold, Lady Jane remembered the housekeeper's attempt to prevent her touching the contents of the desk. Mrs. Clem's room, like herself, was neat, glossy, and extremely cold. Only Mrs. Clem herself was no longer like Mrs. Clem. The red apple glaze had barely faded from her cheeks. Not a lock was disarranged in the unnatural luster of her false front. Even her cap ribbons hung symmetrically along either cheek. But death had happened to her, and had made her into someone else. At first glance, it was impossible to say the unspeakable horror in her wide-open eyes were only the reflection of that change or of the agent by whom it had come. Lady Jane, shuddering, paused a moment while Strammer went up to the bed. Her hand is warm still, but no pulse. He glanced about the room. A glass anywhere? The cowering Georgiana took a hand glass from the neat chest of drawers, and Strammer held it over the housekeeper's drawn-back lip. She's dead, he pronounced. Oh, poor thing, but how? Lady Jane drew near, and was kneeling down, taking the inanimate hand in hers, when Strammer touched her on the arm, then silently raised a finger in warning. Georgiana was crouching in the farther corner of the room, her face buried in her lifted arms. Look here, Strammer whispered. He pointed to Mrs. Clem's throat, and Lady Jane, bending over, distinctly saw a circle of red marks on it. The marks of recent bruises. She looked again into the awful eyes. She's been strangled, Strammer whispered. Lady Jane, with a shiver of fear, drew down the housekeeper's lids. Georgiana, her face hidden, was still sobbing convulsively in the corner. There seemed in the air of the cold, orderly room something that forbade wonderment and silenced conjecture. Lady Jane and Strammer stood and looked at each other without speaking. At length Strammer crossed over to Georgiana and touched her on the shoulder. She appeared unaware of the touch, and he grasped her shoulder and shook it. Where's Mr. Jones? He asked. The girl looked up, her face blurred and distorted with weeping, her eyes dilated as if with the vision of some latent terror. Oh, sir, she's not really dead, is she? Strammer repeated his question in a loud, authoritative voice. Suddenly she echoed it in a scarce-heard whisper. Mr. Jones. Get up, my girl, and send him here to us at once, or tell us where to find him. Georgiana, moved by the odd habit of obedience, struggled to her feet and stood unsteadily, her heaving shoulders braced against the wall. Strammer asked her sharply if she had not her way said. Oh, poor thing, she's so upset, Lady Jane intervened compassionately. Tell me, Georgiana, where shall we find Mr. Jones? The girl turned to her with eyes as fixed as a dead woman's. You won't find him anywhere, she said slowly. Why not? Because he's not here. Not here. Where is he then? Strammer broke in. Georgiana did not seem to notice the interruption. She continued to stare at Lady Jane with Mrs. Clem's awful eyes. He's in his grave in the churchyard these years and years he is. Long before ever I was born, my aunt had never seen him herself, not since she was a tiny child. That's the terror of it. That's why she always had to do what he told her to, because you couldn't ever answer him back. Excuse me. Her horrified gaze turned from Lady Jane to the stony face and the fast glazing pupils of the dead woman. You hadn't ought to have meddled with his papers, my lady. That's what he punished her for. When it came to those papers, he wouldn't ever listen to human reason. He wouldn't. Then flinging her arms above her head, Georgiana straightened herself to her full height before falling in a swoon at Strammer's feet. That was Mr. Jones by Edith Wharton. I really like Edith Wharton. I read her a lot in college. I took a double major of Spanish and English. And was it with a minor in French, I think? Yeah, it was like I did like a double major, Spanish and English, and then a minor in French. And so for the English part, we had to read a lot of English literature, and all the way from like the Canterbury Tales up to like Edith Wharton, Kafka, Metamorphosis. We did a lot of Edith Wharton, I remember. I think we read The House of Mirth even. But that doesn't really fit this channel. I was considering reading it, but it doesn't. My stuff is I just do ghost stories. I don't want to do like Gothic. I want ghost stories specifically. So I'm not going to read The House of Mirth unless like a bunch of people like request it. But even then it would like change it. And then the algorithm will punish me. So I can't. I have to start another channel. I'm not starting another YouTube channel. I already have so many. Oh my God. So anyways, I hope you guys like that. Let me pull up the cards. I want to do the other Saki ones. I do have to still do the pomegranate seed again at some point. Wanted to Sleepy Hollow, a Rose for Emily, but I'm feeling the mood for Saki. Probably have to redo the Judge's House again too, because you know what it was, like I say, when I recorded some of these, I think that the microphone wasn't working right. Either like sometimes those two computers I had, they kept either like quitting on me in the middle of like recording, and I wouldn't even realize like it didn't record it. And with Count Magnus, I had to re-record that. I know I reread it last night, but like a week or two ago, I re-recorded it on Gothic Ghost Stories by Candlelit because for some reason it just stopped in the middle of the story. I was like, what the heck is this? So, because I think I was trying to do the anthology, like the timing, and figure out when I was going through the timestamps, that's how I realized like some of these errors were there. So anyways, what was I telling you? So by the way, I love Count Magnus. It's just such a great story. Anything about M.R. James is good. But Count Magnus and Edith Wharton actually has a good story, but it's not in public domain yet. It's called, I think it's called oh my God, I can't talk. All Souls Night. It's from like the 1930s. I think it was published, so it's not in copyright yet. It might be in the UK, but it's not in the US because I looked into it, because when I first started doing these, I was like, oh, I want to read that one. I think it's like the story is she goes to, well, not her, like Edith Wharton, obviously, but it's a woman character. The story's a character, it's a woman. She goes to her home in New England, and it's, I don't know, I wouldn't call it necessarily a time slip. I don't know what you would call it, but basically it's like the people are not there. She like goes walking around the house, there's no one there. But when she asked them the next day, like, why did you guys all leave? They're like, we were here. So, but it's like she has, would that be All Souls Eve? I'm not sure. It might be like a day or two after Halloween, but it's like no one's there, and she just is walking through the house. It's totally empty. She has, she's scared, obviously. So it's a really good story, though. Really good. And I think actually she sees some woman standing in the driveway, like looking at her. I think. So anyways, we know Edith Wharton is wonderful. There's, who's the other ones too? Amelia Edwards is good. I did by her The Phantom Coach and Was It an Illusion? And I think she's got some other stories too. There's something. There was one with like the Black Forest May at some point too. So I wouldn't say like I'm totally out of stories, but I've done like so many, and I was like trying to figure out like what am I gonna do next. All the ones that I've got left now, they're like all like really long ones, but so I might have to do them like live streams, like but do like part 1 and part 2, and then I can like stitch them together afterwards in a what do you call it? I use CapCut when I edit. I and I just do the audio, and then I really don't bother with going back and doing retakes. There's mistakes, so what? First of all, this is YouTube. This is not like a quote unquote professional audiobook. And if you want to say it is, well, I'm going to leave in my mistakes. I'm not AI, and I'm not a perfect person. I never profess to be perfect. And so anyways, and like I say too, these are free. You know what I mean? It's like YouTube's free. I'm not even getting paid for this. This is like, I'm not monetizing. Okay. Even when I monetize, I'm not going to like bend over backwards and do a pretzel to do like perfect narration or perfect editing. I think actually it's part of the charm when people make mistakes and leave them. And I personally like it. I don't like perfection. I like when people are real and they're a lot of flaws to be seen. Okay, let us pull the cards. And I was talking about, yeah. Oh, no. Glamis Castle, if you don't know what they were talking about. So Glam's Castle, is it Glamis or Glam? It's probably Glam Castle. Or is it Glams? I'm still sometimes like getting the pronunciations because, my God, I think for a while I was saying it's Gloucester. I was saying Gloucester, and when I like first started like looking into Richard III, I was like, I think I was calling it like Kester, like an American who didn't realize, and then I was watching documentaries about him, and people were like Leicester. I'm like, Leicester? What the hell is that? We talking about Leicester, Gloucester? What are you talking about? And then I realized, oh, they're talking about what I was saying, Leicester. And I think I was saying something like Gloucester. Like we just didn't know, you don't know how to like pronounce them. So I'm still trying to like figure out, do you guys say Toms or Thames for the river? And what the heck is the Strand? Is that a fancy section of London or something? Is that and I know, obviously I know the northern counties better than the southern ones, but because Yorkshire is on the west, and then there's like Northumberland is either just south of it or is it parallel? And then Cumbria is on the northwest, and then it's Scotland, obviously. And then somewhere around there, there's like the Pendle, like with the Pendle Witches, because I love Old Demdike with the Pendle Witches. That story from what was it, 1600s, and then I think is it south of London? It's like southeast. There's Kent, where Hever Castle is, and then there's Surrey. I'm not sure where Surrey is in relation to Kent. Like I think they're near each other, because I like that place Ham House. And then I think if you go more west, I know that the most southwestern county is what's Cornwall and Devon, and then is it like Middlesex and Essex is down there in Sussex, I think, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look at a map again. I haven't looked at a map of all the counties. But anyways, so I don't know. I might just go right into Saki after this, after I do the tarot and do like some of the Saki stories. And when I need to take a break, I'll just take one. And then, like I said, because I can either like chop these up later in CapCut. But what I just do is I record. Usually, like when I'm recording not live, what I would do is I record. I have a Focusrite. It's actually, I think you guys can see it. It's that amp box. So this is a Focusrite to the 3rd or 4th generation, I think. I got this last September. And then this is an XLR. It's an AT2020. I know it's like a more starter microphone, but I mean, eventually I want to upgrade to something else like a Rode. But right now, like I say, we're working with what we have. So I have this though. And then what I usually do is I record the sound like in Logic Pro. I was trying Reaper, but I wasn't really happy with it. I wasn't really happy with the quality, and I just wasn't happy with the software. So, but Logic Pro seems to be, it just in the beginning though, it was weird because you have to hit like the R and then record, and then there's like this annoying little metronome ticker thing that has actually been on some of my subliminals, because you have to record yourself saying the affirmations for subliminals that I do. I also make subliminals, on another channel, and so I recorded myself doing my subliminals, and I thought I turned out that little metronome thing, but you hear the ticking thing throughout the whole freaking subliminal. And it's like, and now it's like, I don't want to like go back and re-upload it. So anyways, just getting like the software down. So, but I normally use like Logic Pro, and then I film myself on my camera, not my camera, my phone. which is a what? iPhone 13. It's an older one. And then, yeah, I mean, it's nice to have the newer technology, but they also want you to pay like, I don't know what it is, like what you guys have in Europe, but like, because I think a lot of people from Europe watch, but they want like $70, $80 a month or something. That's stupid. So, anyways, I film on that. I put them together in CapCut, mute the audio, and then if it's like several parts, like I'll publish each video, and then I just put them together in CapCut. That's how I make all my shorts too. I usually make them in CapCut, not Logic Pro. Speaking of which, I do want to make another one soon and publish it today because apparently Copilot was saying since I'm going live so much, YouTube will push my shorts more. So let's look at the cards, and then we can go into either the judge's house or Saki, depending on what I fancy. So okay, so I'm pulling from my Lady Deadly deck. She's the one lady, Amy Rosebart from the Tudor time, and I don't think she unalived herself. We're not allowed to say a certain word, so I use unalive. I don't think it was unaliving. I do think it I can't pick up. It's either I've seen quite actually no, that's not true. That's not totally true. I have picked up something, but I don't know if it's real. But what I like kind of picked up something last week was that so her husband we know was very close to Elizabeth. Now whether they were intimate or not, I think they were. Quite frankly, I think there was horizontal mambo going on between those two. Probably the energy seems it, but again, I can't prove it. But I think they were definitely making love. But anyways, so Amy I think found comfort with somebody else, and actually, kind of what I picked up was that somebody in the household, like her and a servant, and this would not be the first time this happened. And actually, with the Tudors, you want to talk about the Tudors? That's exactly what happened, because what's his name? Nathan Amen. It's I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. He's Welsh, and he's done a lot of research about the books in the other room. I'll have to get it at some point and show you guys. He did a bunch of research about Henry the Seventh and the Tudors, and so basically, I think it was it Owen Tudor? Not Owen. It might have been Owen Tudor. It was this guy like further back, like because Henry the Seventh was what we took over as king in 1485, right? So, but it was like I've got to read the book again. I didn't read the whole book. I started to read it, but then I'm so busy with everything. So, the point is, there was this lady that she was either a duchess or something, and then her husband had died. She was by herself, and I think he was the steward of the house, fell in love, and they began a relationship, and then they had children from the relationship, and one of them was a direct relation of Henry the Seventh, because like the people that don't like him, like say that he was the son of a stable or whatever it was. But so my point is just that it's not the first time it's happened that like somebody especially like a great lady alone, they're around each other, and also there's people with connections. Sometimes you just meet somebody and you just have like this connection with them. There's like a resonance, or like it can just they feel like home or something, and you just fall in love. So anyways, it could be like there's lots of things like that. So anyways, I think that what probably happened was that Lady Dudley may have, I'm not saying this is definitely what happened, but it kind of occurred to me, and I was like, So basically, okay, so what happened? I'm hemming and hawing too much, because I'm almost afraid to say it, because it just sounds so, I don't want to say ludicrous, but it was kind of like when I first felt it, I was like, what? No. But sometimes that's what ends up being what happened. So basically, it was like she and a servant in the house, maybe the cook or somebody, but like that they were lovers. And she sent everybody away that day, and then the two of them were together. And then there was like it was like an accident. There was they either started arguing about something, and it was like, she fell down the stairs and died. and he panicked. And then he like went back with the rest of everybody else. Because I don't know if I don't know if we even have access to those records back then. But so one thought of my mind was, well, was everybody accounted for? But I mean, would we really be able to know that? But maybe like this person, it seemed to like that she was maybe involved with, not saying it was like one of the cooks or something, but there was like somebody that she might have been involved with. There was like an argument, an accident. She fell down the stairs and died. He panics. He runs back to the fair, pretends he was there all along, and nobody knew. So, or they maybe just weren't watching him, so they don't, like, no one said anything if they did notice anything. And then that was like one possibility. Another possibility is maybe she was meeting somebody and they did something. I don't think that she was intending to like harm herself. It doesn't feel like that. It could also just been an accident. There have been people I've seen like in the comments of like different videos say that those stairs in those houses. Now, first of all, that house where it happened is not around anymore to even go look and inspect what staircase it was. But they say that the stairs are often, they could be uneven, and they didn't always have like a stairwell like we have, and sometimes it's just like a rope, and then also those long gowns. So she could have like maybe tripped on her gown, uneven steps, not a good handrail, and then unfortunately she fell down. But it did seem like there were some other injuries that were not consistent with the fall down the stairs that may have been from something else. So I don't think that she intentionally harmed herself. I think I feel like it was more of an accident than an actual murder. But again, hopefully eventually more evidence comes to light, but that's just kind of what I feel. But anyway, so I made a deck because I feel a connection with her. And I love the Tudors. If you haven't noticed, I love the Tudors. So anyways, first card of this deck is Seven of Cups upright. That is like feeling like there's a lot of choices. It could be like fantasy too. And then your next card you get is Three of Pentacles upright. So that's like reconnection. That's it's I don't want to say like twin flame soulmate. I try not to use those words so much anymore, but because I think, well, no, I don't want to say I don't use them, but this is like some type of like strong connection like that. That's upright. But then Two of Cups is reversed. So something is blocking. So maybe it's like somebody's too much in fantasy. There is something real there, but then it's like blocked a little bit with something is blocking the two people coming together. But then you get the Knight of Swords upright. That is like some type of energy. It could be like a communication or something, but it's like moving towards the person. And then the last card is Strength upright. Again, that white knuckle grip holding on. I got to pull one more deck then. This is very interesting, these cards. Let's pull up Patrick. If I'm not saying the name right, sorry. You can educate me then if I'm not saying it right. So anyways, King of Pentacles upright. Okay, so someone's feeling in their power. The Chariot's reversed though. So the Chariot is like a fast-moving energy. So something's blocked. There's like some energy of something being blocked. Some type of action. The Knight of Cups is reversed. So it's like a feeling that wants to be expressed as being held back. The Lover's upright there. That card always comes up. And that's upright. Then Eight of Swords upright. So back to the this is like someone who's like in a lot of anxiety, and they like get in their own mind and like they mind f themselves too much. They get like it's like they overthink, and they like it's literally like, if we could say the word fuck, it's like they're mind effing themselves, but they're doing it to themselves, and they're not doing it because they are like dramatic or anything. It's just it's like an old wound. It's like an old emotional wound. I think they like dated this person that like was like they're always wrong, so they were like terrified now that like anything that they do, they're always wrong. They feel like a lot of shame, and so that's kind of the energy of that card. Someone you were like, if you get that card a lot, like being the Eight of Swords, you could be like, there's like some person or persons that in your past punished you for like they might have maybe made you guess what they feel, played games, and they like really like left like a negative imprint on the person's nervous system and psyche. So now like they are afraid to like be close, and they feel like a lot of shame, and then that gets kicked up a lot of the time. And so they're it's, And it's not like they're sitting there like, oh, I want to feel shame. It's not like that. But it's just like it's like a loop almost it like fires off, and it's like very hard. You can interrupt it, I think, and like start to slow it down, but it's like you have to almost like observe it and just not react to it and just sit there with it and observe it. But again, I'm certainly not like a therapist or anything. I'm not saying that is the way, but I myself used to feel, I think I used to like, I wouldn't say I was anxious, but I used to be like a little bit sometimes dwelling too much on past things that had happened to me that like either weren't fair or whatever. And like what I, like from talking with some people like that helped me process that and move on from it was they said like, just slow down, observe it, don't judge it. And then when you do that, like there's like a space between the thoughts. Then when you just sit there and observe it, it kind of like the thought feels heard and then it calms down a bit. If that makes sense. I personally, maybe it's like mindfulness and meditation stuff. I found that helpful. So, and then the last card is 9 of Cups reversed. So that is like blocked. It's like blocked satisfaction, blocked happiness. And of course you're going to have that because with the 8 of Swords, when that being, with the 8 of Swords being upright, then, if you have like a lot of anxiety, you're going to be unhappy. But there is healing here though, because you've got the King of Wands upright. The Chariot though, it's like this anxiety, so it's like blocking the Chariot and the Knight of Cups upright. Meaning, because like they're reversed in this reading, but they want to come upright to go towards the Lovers, if that makes sense. So, and eventually it does. It's kind of like it's almost like a loop, I think, like some of these things, because like I tend to like try to like look at the archetypes and the cards and the whole energy of the message, and I feel like it's like this King of Pentacles energy. This person wants to move towards this other thing, but they get like caught up in this anxiety and mind of themselves, and then they freeze. But then they eventually come out of that, and then they do go towards the Lovers eventually. And the 8 of Swords, the other thing about it is that is eventually the when the anxiety calms down and like the shame cools down, the chains that you think are there come down, because you realize that you're self-imposing them on yourself, and you just say screw it, and you like go for whatever it is, like whatever action you want to do or something you want to do differently. You start to like move in that direction, if that makes sense. That's what I think is going on with these cards. And again, these are general readings. This is just, and it's all the collective. This is not like about any one particular person. It's just like a general collective. So like, because whenever I'm looking at cards, I like look at like what is the energy. So it may or may not resonate. If it doesn't resonate, don't feel bad. And again, I am available for readings if people want readings. I certainly, I changed my price. I'm $333.33 now instead of $250. I used to charge $250, but just with the way everything's worked out and price of things has gone up, so I had to change my price. But there's either like a link in the bottom of all the videos if you want to do it. I'm not saying you have to, but just if you want to ever have like a more personalized reading to help you like get to the bottom of something or some information or something, I'm definitely available for that. But because that's why I was saying like these are general readings, so it may or may not resonate. If it doesn't, that's okay. And also the readings are just they're for entertainment. And if you don't want to listen to the reading, you don't certainly have to. But I'm going to definitely do them. I'm going to always do them at the end of every video. Especially I made this deck. I love this deck. I think I told you guys. I probably have to. Well, no. I don't have to. It's on this channel actually. I'll tell you the name of the video, so that if you want to watch it ever. Let's see. We'll do the Judge's House in a second. I'll just add it to the title later. So, because this channel's Ghost Patrick's Last. I hope I'm saying that right. Ghost Patrick. I hope I'm saying it right. I hope I'm butchering the name. I usually say Ghost Patrick. I feel like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I've, I don't want to say I talk to him. I don't mean like I hear him or anything, but okay. So the first part of I did 2 videos of research that I did. The first one, it's on this channel. So if you go to the oldest videos, The Lost Lord of the Old North, the thumbnail says 800 years later. It's about 35 minutes long. That's my first video talking about my first bout of research. And then I think I did another video about somebody else that was from like 80 to, well, no, because Patrick was born 1138. So this other guy would have been born about 120 years before that. There was it under, I forget which king it was. It wasn't Richard the First because he's later. He's after, because Patrick actually. It was somebody, I think it was before William the Conqueror. No, it had to be because it was the early thousands. But there's this guy that was, I forget his name, but he was lured basically to his death. And I think he actually was from Cumbria too. Like maybe either Penrith or like, but he was one of, yeah, it was Cumbrian. And he was lured somewheres and then he was unfortunately intentionally set up and they killed him. So that's a very short video. It was only about 3 minutes. And then I did my second part of my research was, it's called Candlelit. It goes Patrick and his children. It is 21 minutes long. So if you guys ever want to like get to like the whole story of all of it, and then the rest of the videos, this channel is like the other one is like French Rococo, but this is like where I can explore my like Welsh Cumbrian side and like that aesthetic and nice videos. There's like a nice Wales at dusk. There's a whole bunch of like videos on here that are different things. So and then there's also the ghost stories, obviously. And but so if you want to watch that one about go to like the oldest videos. It's like the oldest videos. It is the 6th one. If you're on a desktop, if you're on a phone, it probably if you're scrolling, it'd be like 6. Yeah, because there's the first 4 stories I did here from last summer. The Judge's House, the vignette, number 90 was Illusion. You'll say, oh, they're already here. No, these are bad recordings. They're old, but I just leave them on there because they're not like on camera or anything. They're just older. So when it's like a different format. But if you ever want to see like how I use the sound, because I was like listening myself too. After even like a few months after recording those, I was like, oh my God, these are so bad. I like the Judge's House. I like these are actually my 4 favorite ghost stories. I mean, I love a lot of these ghost stories, but number 90 by B.M. Croker, Was an Illusion by Amelia Edwards, Vignette by Mark James, and then The Judge's House by Bram Stoker. Of course, that's a classic. But there's a lot of these stories I like. Like I did a whole bunch of M.R. James. I think they're all on the other channel. I just love these stories. I love this genre. But the AI, it freaking doesn't know what the heck it's talking about. I'm going to do more by Anatole Labraz. I did read The Owl. I had like my first version was, I kind of named it the Christmas version because I don't know if the sound quality is 100% the best. But like I was talking about different things on that, and then I re-recorded that to be like updated. So that's why it's called the spring version, not summer version. We're not in summer yet. And so we have those. And then I did the Ghost and the Bone Setters on here by Lafanu. And then the rest I think are kind of like anthologies of like different. And I did do like my Christmas anthologies are already up. So those are on. Nobody's watched it though. I don't know. It's like that's because that's why it's not like I didn't record for like 2 weeks. I've been busy with stuff, but it does get a little bit like nobody's watching these. I'm like doing these and nobody's watching them. At least not now. Like probably like hopefully eventually people will be, but it's like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like it's like you sit there and you work hard at something and then you're like, what the heck? And then Copilot's like, oh, you need this many videos, you need that many videos. And it's like, no, you don't. That's a baloney. You don't need a certain number of videos. It's just, oh, these channels grow over time. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever. I guess it's like I don't have 6 years to like wait till, YouTube decides to do whatever. I want to grow faster than that. I want to like, I don't know. I'm very ambitious with this stuff. And I don't like to sit around and just be like, oh, okay. Even like when I say I'm going to take a day off, I don't end up taking a day off. I just don't. I try to, but it just doesn't happen. There are easier days than others, but. So anyways, let's start. Should we do the Judge's House? We did Mr. Jones. I'm not in the mood for that woman from... Wait, this is the poem. This is not even the friggin' story. Oh, God. I have to find the story of the pomegranate seed. I have to redo that. I don't know. That woman in that story, she just like... I don't know why. That was like the hardest story to get into, the pomegranate seed by Edith Wharton. The wife just like... It's like... I can't understand her. She's so, like, I don't know how to explain it. I just don't understand her. She's hard to relate to for me, I guess. I have to find the text. This is the poem. It's not the actual story. So we don't want to read that. A rose for Emily. How long is this? Oh, this is not that long. You know, maybe we'll do that and then we'll do Saki. This is not that long. Let's do that one first, real quick. I just want to make the text a little bigger. Okay, let's do right now A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, and then we'll do some Saki. And I want to do the Judge's House tonight, too. I'll just take breaks as I need to, and then just come back and go on and off as I need to. All right, so this is right now we're going to do A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. So, when Miss Emily Grierson died, our whole town went to her funeral. The men, through a sort of respectful affection for a fallen monument. The woman, mostly out of curiosity to see the inside of her house, which no one save an old Negro manservant, a combined gardener and cook, had seen in at least 10 years. It was a big squarish frame house that had once been white, decorated with cupolas and spires, and scrolled balconies in the heavy, lightsome style of the 70s, set on what had once been our most select street. But garages and cotton gins had encroached and obliterated even the august names of that neighborhood. Only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores. And now Miss Emily had gone to join the representatives of those august names, where they lay in the Cedar Bermuda Cemetery, among the ranked and anonymous graves of Union and Confederate soldiers who fell at the Battle of Jefferson. Alive, Miss Emily had been a tradition, a duty and a care, a sort of hereditary obligation upon the town, dating from that day in 1894 when Colonel Sartoris, the mayor, he who fathered the edict that no Negro woman should appear on the streets without an apron, remitted her taxes, the dispensation dating from the death of her father, on into perpetuity, not that Miss Emily would have accepted charity. Colonel Sartoris invented an involved tale to the effect that Miss Emily's father had loaned money to the town, which the town, as a matter of business, preferred this way of repaying. Only a man of Colonel Sartoris' generation and thought could have invented it, and only a woman could have believed it. When the next generation, with its more modern ideas, became mayors and aldermen, this arrangement created some little dissatisfaction. On the first of the year, they mailed her a tax notice. February came, and there was no reply. They wrote her a formal letter asking her to call the sheriff's office at her convenience. A week later, the mayor wrote her himself offering to call or to send his car for her, and received in reply on paper of an archaic shape in a thin, flowing calligraphy and faded ink to the effect that she no longer went out at all. The tax notice was also enclosed without comment. They called a special meeting of the Board of Aldermen. A deputation waited upon her, knocked at the door, through which no visitor had passed, since she had ceased giving china painting lessons 8 or 10 years earlier. They were admitted by the old Negro into a dim hall from which a stairway mounted into still more shadow. It smelled of dust and disuse, a close, dank smell. The Negro led them into the parlor. It was furnished in heavy, leather-covered furniture. When the Negro opened the blinds on one side, they could see that the leather was cracked. And when they sat down, a faint dust rose sluggishly around their thighs, spinning their slow motes into the single sunray. On a tarnished gilt easel before the fireplace stood a crayon portrait of Miss Emily's father. They rose when she entered, a small, fat woman in black, with a thin gold chain descending to her waist and vanishing to her belt, leaning on an ebony cane with a tarnished gold head. Her skeleton was small and sparse. Perhaps that was why what would have been merely plumpness in another was obesity in her. She looked bloated, like a body long submerged in motionless water, and of that pallid hue. Her eyes, lost in the fatty ridges of her face, looked like 2 small pieces of coal pressed into a lump of dough as they moved from one face to another while the visitors started their errand. She did not ask them to sit. She just stood in the door and listened quietly until the spokesman came to a stumbling halt. Then they could hear the invisible watch ticking at the end of the gold chain. Her voice was dry and cold. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Colonel Sartoris explained it to me. Perhaps one of you can gain access to the city records and satisfy yourselves. But we are the city authorities, Miss Emily. Didn't you get a notice from the sheriff signed by him? I received a paper, yes, Miss Emily said. Perhaps he considers himself the sheriff. I have no taxes in Jefferson. But there is nothing on the books to show that, you see. We must go by that. See Colonel Sartoris. I have no taxes in Jefferson. But Miss Emily, See Colonel Sartoris. Colonel Sartoris had been dead almost 10 years. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Toby, the Negro appeared. Show these gentlemen out. Part 2. So she vanquished them horse and foot, just as she had vanquished their fathers 30 years before about the smell. That was 2 years after her father's death and a short time after her sweetheart, the one we believed would marry her, had deserted her. After her father's death, she went out very little. After her sweetheart went away, people hardly saw her at all. A few of the ladies had the temerity to call, but were not received, and the only sign of life about the place was the Negro man, a young man then going in and about with a market basket. Just as if any man, could keep a kitchen properly, the ladies said. So they were not surprised when the smell developed. It was another link between the gross, teeming world and the high and mighty Griersons. A neighbor, a woman, complained to the mayor, Judge Stevens, 80 years old. But what will you have me do about it, madam? He said. Why, send her word to stop it, the woman said. Isn't there a law? I'm sure that won't be necessary, Judge Stevens said. It's probably just a snake or a rat that, I'm not going to say that word, person of hers killed in the yard. I'll speak to him about it. The next day, he received 2 more complaints, one from a man who came in diffident deprecation. We really must do something about it, Judge. I'd be the last one in the world to bother Miss Emily, but we've got to do something. That night, the Board of Aldermen met. 3 graybeards and 1 younger man, a member of the rising generation. It's simple enough, he said. Send her word to have her place cleaned up. Give her time to do it in, and if she don't... Damn it, sir, Judge Stevens said. Will you accuse a lady to her face of smelling bad? So the next night after midnight, 4 men crossed Miss Emily's lawn and slunk about the house like burglars, sniffing along the base of the brickwork and at the cellar openings, while one of them performed a regular sawing motion with his hand out of a sack slunk from his shoulder. They broke open the cellar door and sprinkled lime there and in all the outbuilding. As they recrossed the lawn, a window that had been dark was lighted, and Miss Emily saw in it the light behind her, and her upright torso motionless as that of an idol. They crept quietly across the lawn and into the shadow of the locusts that lined the street. After a week or 2, the smell went away. That was when people had really begun to feel sorry for her. People in our town, remembering how old Lady Wyatt, her great aunt, had gone completely crazy at last, believed that the Griersons held themselves a little too high for what they really were. None of the young men were quite good enough for Miss Emily and such. We had long thought of them as a tableau. Miss Emily, a slender figure in white in the background, her father a spraddled silhouette in the foreground, his back to her and clutching a horsewhip, the 2 of them framed by that black-flung front door. So when she got to be 30 and was still single, we were not pleased exactly, but vindicated. Even when insanity in the family, she wouldn't have turned down all of her chances if they really materialized. When her father died, it got about that the house was all that was left to her, and in a way people were glad. At last they could pity Miss Emily. Being left alone and a pauper, she had become humanized. Now she too would know the old thrill and the old despair of a penny more or less. The day after his death, all the ladies prepared to call at the house and offer condolence, and ate as is our custom. Miss Emily met them at the door, dressed as usual with no trace of grief on her face. She told them that her father was not dead. She did that for 3 days when the ministers calling on her and the doctors trying to persuade her to let them dispose of the body. Just as they were about to resort to law and force, she broke down and they buried her father quickly. We did not say she was crazy then. We believed she had to do that. We remembered that all the young men her father had driven away, and we knew that with nothing left, she would have to cling to that which was robbed her, as people will. Part 3. She was sick for a long time. When we saw her again, her hair was cut short, making her look like a girl, with a vague resemblance to those angles in colored church windows, sort of tragic and serene. The town had just let the contracts for paving the sidewalks, and in the summer after her father's death, they began the work. The construction company came with people and mules and machinery, and a foreman named Homer Barron, a Yankee, a big, dark, ruddy man with a big voice and eyes lighter than his face. The little boys would fall in groups to hear him cuss the people, and the people singing in time to rise and fall the picks. Pretty soon he knew everybody in town. Whenever you heard a lot of laughing anywhere about the square, Homer Barron would be in the center of the group. Presently we began to see him and Miss Emily on Sunday afternoons, driving in the yellow-wheeled buggy in the matched team of bays from the livery stable. At first we were glad Miss Emily would have an interest, because the ladies all said, of course, a Grierston would not think seriously of a northerner, a day laborer. But there were still older people who said that even grief could not cause a real lady to forget noblesse oblige without calling it noblesse oblige. They just said, poor Emily, her kinfolk should come to her. She had some kin in Alabama, but years ago, Her father had fallen out with them over the estate of old Lady Wyatt, the crazy woman, and there was no communication between the families. They had not even been represented at the funeral. And as soon as the old people said, "Poor Emily," the whispering began. "Don't you suppose it's really so?" they said to one another. "Of course it is. What else could?" This behind their hands, rustling of cream silk and steam behind jalousies, closed upon the sun of Sunday afternoon, as a thin swift clap, clap, clap of the match steam past poor Emily. She carried her head high enough, even when she believed that she was fallen. Even when we believed that she was fallen. It was as if she demanded more than ever the recognition of her dignity as the last Grierson, as if it had wanted that touch of earthiness to reaffirm her perviousness, like when she bought that rat poison, the arsenic. That was over a year after they began to say poor Emily, while the two female cousins were visiting her. "I want some poison," she said to the druggist. She was over 30 then, still a slight woman, though thinner than usual, with cold, haughty black eyes and a face the flesh of which was strained across the temples and about the eye sockets as you imagine a light housekeeper's face ought to look. "I want some poison," she said. "Yes, Miss Emily, what kind? For rats and such, I recommend." "I want the best you have. I don't care what kind." The druggist named several. "They'll kill anything up to an elephant, but what you want is arsenic," Miss Emily said. "Is that a good one?" Is arsenic? Yes, ma'am, but what you want? I want arsenic." The druggist looked down at her. She looked back at him, erect, her face like a strained flag. "Why, of course," the druggist said, "if that's what you want, but the law requires you to tell what you are going to use it for." Miss Emily just stared at him, her head tilted back in order to look him eye to eye until he looked away and went and got the arsenic and wrapped it up. The Negro delivery boy brought her the package. The druggist didn't come back. When she opened the package at home, there was written on the box under the skull and bones, "For rats." Part 4. So, the next day we all said she will kill herself, and we said it would be the best thing. When she first began to be seen with Homer Barron, we had said she will marry him. Then we said she will persuade him yet, because Homer himself had remarked he liked the men, and it was known that he drank with the younger men in the Ox Club, that he was not a married man. Later we said poor Emily behind the jalousies as they passed on Sunday afternoon in the glittering buggy. Miss Emily with her head high, and Homer Barron with his hat cocked and a cigar in his teeth, reins and whip and a yellow glove. Then some of the ladies began to say that it was a disgrace to a town and a bad example to the young people. The men did not want to interfere, but at last the ladies forced the Baptist minister, Miss Emily's people were Episcopal, to call upon her. He would never divulge what happened during the interview, but he refused to go back again. The next Sunday they drove about the streets, and the following day the minister's wife wrote to Miss Emily's relations in Alabama. So, she had bloodkin under her roof again, and we sat back to watch developments. First, nothing happened. Then we were sure that they would be married. We learned that Miss Emily had been to the jeweler's and ordered a man's toilette set in silver with the letters HB on each piece. 2 days later, we learned that she had bought a complete outfit of men's clothing, including a nightshirt, and we said, "They are married." We were really glad. We were glad because the two female cousins, even more Grierson than Miss Emily had ever been. So we were not surprised when Homer Barron, the streets had been finished some time since, was gone. We were a little disappointed that there was not a public blowing off, but we believed they had gone on to prepare for Miss Emily's coming, or to give her a chance to get rid of the cousins. By that time it was a cabal, and we were all Miss Emily's allies to help circumvent the cousins. Sure enough, after another week they departed. And as we had expected all along, within 3 days Homer Barron was back in town. A neighbor saw that the Negro man had met him at the kitchen door at dusk one evening. And that was the last we saw of Homer Barron and of Miss Emily for some time. The Negro man went in and out with the market basket, but the front door remained closed. Now and then we could see her at the window for a moment, as the men did that night when they sprinkled the lime. But for almost 6 months she did not appear on the streets, though we knew this was to be expected too, as if that quality of her father, which had thwarted her woman's life so many times, had been too virulent and too furious to die. When we next saw Miss Emily, she had grown fat and her hair was turning gray. During the next few years it fewed grayer and grayer until it attained an even pepper and salt iron gray when it ceased turning. Up to the day of her death at 74, it was still that vigorous iron gray, like the hair of an active man. From that time on, her front door remained closed, save for a period of 6 or 7 years when she was about 40, during which she gave lessons in china painting. She fitted up a studio in one of the downstairs rooms, where the daughters and granddaughters of Colonel Sartois, contemporaries, were sent to her with the same regularity and the same spirit that they were sent to church on Sundays, with a 25-cent piece for the collection plate. Meanwhile, her taxes had been remitted. Then the newer generation became the backbone and the spirit of the town, and the painting pupils who grew up and fell away and did not send their children to her with boxes of color and tedious brushes, and pictures cut from ladies' magazines. The front door closed upon the last one and remained closed for good. When the town got free postal delivery, Miss Emily alone refused to let them fasten the metal numbers above her door and attach a mailbox to it. She would not listen to them. Daily, monthly, yearly, we watched the Negro grow grayer and more stooped, going in and out with the market basket. Each December, we sent her a text notice, which would be returned by the post office about a week later, unclaimed. Now and then we would see her in one of the downstairs windows. She had evidently shut up the top floor of the house, like the carven torso of an idol in a niche, looking or not looking at us. We all never could tell which. Thus she passed from generation to generation, dear, inescapable, impervious, tranquil, and perverse. So she died. Fell ill in the house filled with dust and shadows, with only a doddering Negro man to wait on her. We did not even know she was sick. We had long since given up trying to get any information from the Negro. He talked to no one, probably not even to her, for his voice had grown harsh and rusty as if from disuse. She died in one of the downstairs rooms in a heavy walnut bed with a curtain, her gray head propped on a pillow yellow and moldy with age and lack of sunlight. Part 5. The Negro met the first of the ladies at the front door and let them in, with their hushed, sibilant voices and their quick, curious glances, and then he disappeared. He walked right through the house and out the back and was never seen again. The 2 female cousins came at once. They held the funeral on the second day, with the town coming to look at Miss Emily beneath a mass of bought flowers, with the crayon face of her father musing profoundly above the bier, and the ladies sibilant and macabre, and the very old men, some in their brushed Confederate uniforms, on the porch and the lawn, talking to Miss Emily as if she had been a contemporary of theirs, believing that they had danced with her and courted her, perhaps confusing time with its mathematical progression, as it will do, to which all the past is not a diminishing road, but instead a huge meadow, which no winter ever quite touches, divided from the now by the narrow bottleneck of the most recent decades of years. Already we knew that there was one room in that region upstairs above which no one had seen in 40 years, and which would have to be forced. They waited until Miss Emily was decently on the ground before they opened it. The violence of breaking down the door seemed to fill this room with pervading dust. A thin, acrid pall, as of the tomb, seemed to light ever upon this room, decked and furnished as for a bridal. Upon the valance curtains of faded rose color, upon the rose-shaded lights, upon the dressing table, upon the delicate array of crystal and the man's toilette things backed with tarnished silver so tarnished that the monogram was obscured. Among them lay a collar and tie, as if they had just been removed, which lifted left upon the surface a pale crescent in the dust. Upon a chair hung the suit, carefully folded beneath it the 2 mute shoes and the discarded socks. The man himself lay in the bed. For a long while, we just stood there, looking down at the profound and fleshless grin. The body had apparently once laid in the attitude of an embrace, but now, the long sleep that outlasts love, that conquers even the grimace of love, had cuckolded at him. What was left of him rotted beneath what was left of the nightshirt, had become from the bed in which he lay, and upon him and upon the pillow beside him lay that even coating of the patient and biting dust. Then we noticed that in the second pillow was the indentation of a head. One of us lifted something from it, and leaning forward, that faint, invisible, dry dust, and acrid in the nostrils, we saw a long strand of iron gray hair. So that was A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. I think he and F. Scott Fitzgerald are considered some of the best American writers. Well, it probably depends who you talk to. Everybody's got a F. Scott Fitzgerald, Hemingway. I mean, they're all great. But so anyways, this is, I think, like a Southern Gothic, if you want to say. Very interesting. So anyways, because when I saw Rose for Emily, I thought it was a little bit sweeter tale, but I'm glad I read it for you guys. So let's pull some more cards, and then I will take a quick break, and I'll do The Judge's House and Sake, because I guess we'll just turn that into an anthology. I'll take a quick break after this, and then I'll just come back on live and read it. So this way, because apparently when you go live, it does boost your channel, and it boosts. The co-pilot was saying it boosts a whole niche. Like if a bunch of us ghost writers or ghost narrators all go if everybody goes live a bit here and there, even for 20 minutes, that I guess it boosts the algorithm. And so let's see. All right, let me get. So apparently Margaret wants to come forward. So we're gonna pull some cards from Margaret Beaufort. I guess we'll do 3 because I wanted to take a quick break. All right, you got strength upright. So this is like, could be inner strength, but I feel like it's more like the energy of somebody who's like holding on with like a white knuckle grip. You got the Empress reversed. They feel like not good enough for some reason. It's like they feel like they're not in abundance. And it's almost like they're like comparing themselves to other people and they feel like they're not good enough. Yeah, and then you got the 5 of Swords. So there's like some type of like inner conflict going on. Let me just pull a few more cards on this one to see. So they feel like they're not good enough, but again, that's not true. It's just but it's in their mind, it's true. That doesn't mean it's true. I'm just seeing what the thoughts of this person are, or like the energy of this. All right, you have the Hermit upright, so they withdraw by themselves. 8 of Cups upright, they're leaving something behind. 9 of Pentacles is upright, that's like being happy in a garden. Then you have the King of Cups upright, so maybe they're like leaving something behind that was causing pain. And then like this 9 of Cups upright, this is like moving into like some type of like abundance and happiness. And the King of Cups upright, that's like someone who's in love and happy. And then they got the Queen of Pentacles upright, that's like this could be like a couple. Like, so he's the King of Cups, he's very happy in love, and then she's the Queen of Pentacles upright, is like a woman who's like businesswoman, like very luminous, magnanimous, generous, somebody who's very. And then you have Ace of Pentacles upright, so like something real. Interesting. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. I will take a quick break and then I will come back on. I want to read The Judge's House and my Saki anthology. That's like probably like what, 2 hours, I think. If I need to take a break in between the two, I will. And so I'll pop back on in like a few minutes. So I'll see y'all then.